Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share UFO sightings horror stories. First story. 70 years ago, a UFO crashed in Roswell, New Mexico. Not a weather balloon or a satellite or any other clandestine, top-secret human-made object. No, it was a goddamn UFO, and I'm tired of repeating myself, of the ridicule of the cover-ups. I've got alien lore running in my blood, see. My grandfather owned the ranch adjacent to the one where it crashed, then my daddy after him, and now me. I've grown up around countless tales told and retold about what happened that night exactly 70 years ago. Some I've memorized by heart. I think the detail that always stuck out to me was the one about the beings. According to my grandfather, there were 3 aliens. One died at the site, one died in custody. Who the hell knows where the third one went? And that's what gets me. Where's that one? Did it escape? Is it still living out there, somewhere in the desert? Is it afraid? Or plotting revenge? Sometimes, late at night, I'll stay up speculating about what happened to it. I like to think that it's still out there somewhere, watching, waiting. At least, that's what I believe. And Daddy always told me all that matters is the belief. I'm sure you all know that in early July 1947 something crashed into a field in Roswell. And you probably heard all about the debris and the speculation and those who were labeled conspiracy theorists for contesting those speculations. But have you heard about how the animals still avoid the crash site to this day? How compasses go crazy when you walk through the area? That sometimes at night you can hear a strange, keening sound boiling up from the ground, like something is buried way beneath the surface? Now, if you've ever seen Breaking Bad, you know just how damn desolate New Mexico can be. You can hide a lot out there, even whole flying saucers. And sometimes I wonder, what if they never took the thing? What if they left it right where it was hidden in plain sight, or at least underneath it? What if that's why strange things still happen around here? Thoughts like those kept me up for longer than I'd like to admit, so I did the only logical thing one could do in this situation. I figured out how I could profit off of it. And I started giving tours, letting those who want to believe peruse my land, scour the sky. Make a decent buck off it too. But I'm not here to brag about my business savvy, no. I'm here to write about something else I saw last night, slipping between the stars, obscuring the moon. Told myself I'd finish it before the tour tonight. So here we are. There were only 3 of us that night, including me, which was odd. Figured the anniversary would attract more people out. Then again, I suppose the thrill that Roswell once held in the consciousness of most Americans has dwindled in recent years. So it goes, I guess. The moon was waxing gibbous, so it wasn't exactly ideal UFO watching conditions, but I didn't get any notice of cancellation. So at exactly 11 p.m., I left my house to meet them. And for those wondering, I find the best time to gaze up is on nights when the moon is new and the sky dark. You'll see more, much more. I saw them standing by the edge of my property, dimly lit by the light of the moon. As I got closer, I could see that it was a man and a woman, but it wasn't until I was right next to them that I saw it might have been a dad and his daughter. The guy was wearing a black suit, and at first, I felt anger and fear rise up thinking back to all the stories I heard of the men in black. But he didn't seem the type, leaning carelessly against the fence, reading something on his phone. And he had no tie. That was something both my grandfather and daddy were adamant on. They always wore black suits, black ties, black shoes, black hats, black sunglasses, and drove black cars. Always. Only their shirts were white. The girl next to him, in her teens, maybe younger or older, had one foot propped up on the bottom rung of the fence. She looked pissed. She was wearing a faded black wolves in the throne room shirt, jeans, and those token red high tops. The shirt looked a few sizes too big for her, and I looked at the man wondering if it might be his. Hello, I called over to them, waving. The guy looked up from his phone and waved back, smiling, but the girl stayed where she was, a look of complete indifference on her features. Hey, nice night, the man replied. So let's have names. I'll go first. I'm Taylor. Edward, the man said, then looked over at the girl. She looked away, clearly in a bad mood. So he continued. And this is, my niece Eleanor. I paused for a beat, thrown off by his hesitation in naming the girl, then said, Oh, like Eleanor Roosevelt? But she sighed and replied, No. Like Eleanor Gardner, daughter of Samwise Gamgee. Samwise. Edward cleared his throat. Her parents are big fans of Tolkien. Oh, like the Lord of the Rings. Yep, exactly, Edward said. I'm surprised they didn't name you something more overt, like Arwen or Galadriel. He laughed. Right, Eleanor? She rolled her eyes. Right, Edward. And it's L now, remember? Edward smirked. Oh, yes. How could I have ever forgotten? I thought the girl, Eleanor L., was going to give him attitude again, but instead she looked up at him, beaming. I told her dad I would take her to a super fun place. It was between this or Area 51, Elle said, which is still an option if you want to go. She sighed long and heavy. I told you I don't want to die. Edward grinned brightly. And I told you you'll be with me. I looked between them, both amused and bemused, then said, I take it your niece likes aliens and the sort? Edward burst out laughing. Eleanor rolled her eyes and said, Absolutely loathe them. I laughed lightly, unsure how to read the two, wondering for a moment if the guy, Edward, might have kidnapped the girl, then said, Shall we? I took them out to the area the UFO crashed. Of course, we couldn't technically cross over into the crash site proper, but we got close enough. Edward was carrying expensive-looking binoculars, his leather shoes crunching against the rocks and dust and dirt of the desert. You ever seen a UFO before? He asked me, handing the binoculars to Eleanor, and then looked up himself. I've seen things, unexplainable things, whether they're from out of this world or not is still up for debate. I glanced at Eleanor. She wasn't looking at the stars, but the moon, and I glanced up too, just in time to see a cloud race across its face. You? Edward was quiet for a moment, thinking. 7. Pardon. I've seen 7 truly unidentified flying objects. 8 if you count the one over Black Mountain, but I'm not so sure. You've seen exactly 7 UFOs? Edward looked down at me and nodded. Yeah, at least we didn't have any documentation on them at the time. Now we do, of course, but I'm sure you could imagine our frustration at finding things we didn't know about. He suddenly flicked his arm out, checking his wristwatch. What is it you do again? Instead of answering, he walked over to the girl and tapped her shoulder. Elle. He took the binoculars from her, held them up to his face, and pointed them directly above us. Ah, and here it is right on time. Here what is that? Eleanor hissed beside me, pointing up with her right arm, guiding my gaze. And then I saw it, this thing up there, shaped like a triangle, gliding across the sky. I could tell it was there from the way it blocked out the specks that made up the Milky Way. But it wasn't until it slid across the surface of the moon that I gasped. It was like nothing I had ever seen before, and I've seen some strange shit out here at night. Suddenly, a sound rang out from above us, underneath us, around us, and I yelled, covering my ears, moving to crouch. You know that sound of tripods make from War of the Worlds, that loud, booming, horrifying shit? That's what it sounded like. That's the only thing I can compare it to. It was loud, so loud, and I shook my head, trying to rid myself of it. Next to me, Edward stood stock still, gazing up as if he couldn't hear anything at all, and for a moment, I wondered if I was really hearing anything or if the sound was being projected into my mind from whatever that thing in the sky was. But then I saw that Eleanor was looking at Edward, and her face was a mask of terror. See, she stopped suddenly, glanced at me, then up, then back at her uncle. Edward, I'm scared. I know, but it's okay. I'm pretty sure that's a T-33. So, they won't be coming down here. They're just watching. Edward paused for a beat, then said, and waiting. I heard myself say. For what? For the signal to invade or abduct. He grinned sinisterly from underneath the binoculars. Eleanor made a displeased noise, and he chuckled. Only kidding, E. Only kidding. As we watched, the triangle disappeared behind the clouds, and back into obscurity. Edward, looking over at Eleanor, suggested we headed back, that it was late. I glanced at the girl. It looked like she might cry, and nodded in agreement. We walked back to my house in relative silence, Edward glancing up every so often, then checking his watch. Eleanor trailed behind him, her head down, like a sad puppy, and as soon as we arrived back, she immediately went to Edward's car, a black Jeep, and shut herself inside. Edward turned to me, sorry about that. I held up my hand and said, "Oh, it's no problem. I know how teens are." He nodded, then opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off, unable to stop myself. "What was that thing? Do you know? Was it really a UFO?" Edward opened his mouth again, closed it, thought for a moment, then said, "Just be careful. And thank you for the tour." Confused, I said, Yeah, sure, you're welcome. Hope you get home safe." He smiled, turned, and got into the Jeep. I waved them off as they drove down the dirt road in the direction of Colorado, and stood watching them until their headlights died away into the darkness. This morning, I woke up to my phone pinging and flicked it on to half a dozen notifications. Apparently, everyone who was registered for my tour tonight canceled, and then 4 men took their spots. One of them messaged me, told me he was excited to talk to me, to pick my brain, whatever that means. So that's it. I saw something unexplainable last night, something that is indicative of something dark and sinister and hidden. But that's not what terrifies me. What terrifies me is knowing that they're just up there, waiting for the right moment, and those who know about them down here don't seem too concerned. Shouldn't we be concerned? Shouldn't we question everything? And with that in mind, don't listen to me. Go see for yourself. Go out at night. Look up. Second story. My true childhood paranormal experience. A UFO turns into a military jet. Ever since I was a very young lad, I always pondered the existence of extraterrestrials, perhaps like all of us from a certain age. For me, growing up in the northeast of England, no older than 10, the existence of aliens, or UFOs for that matter, was as mysterious and uncertain as the existence of God himself. Even the existence of other things like vampires, werewolves, Bigfoot, or the Loch Ness Monster, Nessie, as we Brits like call her, was either as likely or unlikely to exist. As that young, blonde-haired boy with pointy ears, the only aliens I knew of were from the movies I watched. Whether it was War of the Worlds or Independence Day, these movies could only imagine the possibility of alien life and the consequences of that, without providing the real thing. But by the year 2012 and barely in a secondary school, it would seem I may finally have my answer, whether I really accepted it or not. I have already recently shared both of my childhood UFO experiences before. But being a writer by trade, I thought I'd use my craft to revisit them, in the hope of fleshing out as much of these two mysteries as possible, so I could decisively decide if what I saw as a boy was indeed real or not. For the reader, it will also be up to you to decide if the events I witnessed happened as I saw them, or if my childhood imagination got the better of me, or if I'm really just full of it. Not that it's really worth much of a damn without any evidence, but the following of what I'm about to tell you did in fact happen, as I saw it, and to the best of my recollection. By the year 2012, I've been growing up in the East Riding of Yorkshire for the past 7 years in the average-sized but oddly named port town of Goole. This town was of no particular interest, except perhaps for its 2 landmarks, 2 rather tall water towers, humorously named the Salt and Pepper Pots. Settled beside a tributary river, Goole was sparsely surrounded by patches of farmland and large crop fields. Perhaps the perfect setting for a UFO story, like the crop circle stories I knew of in the United States. However, my first UFO experience wouldn't happen in some field on the outskirts of town, but in the town itself. More precisely, it would happen no more than 100 meters outside of my bedroom window. Unfortunately, I don't remember the precise year this first event took place, although I do know it happened in either 2011 or 2012. Therefore, I was either in my final year of primary school or my nerve-wracking first year of secondary. Regardless, I would have been around 11 years old. As a child, and even through my teens, I was always a bad sleeper, either getting no sleep at all or waking up in the very early hours of the morning. It was on one of these early mornings that I woke up to my silent, pitch-black bedroom, with everyone else in my house fast asleep. Not having an alarm clock or phone to tell the time, I wondered what time of night it was, perhaps to know how much more sleep I could get. As I said, this was all a regular occurrence for me, as I was peeking my head through the curtain next to my bedside to see if the sky was still dark. By looking out from my bedroom window, I would have seen my 20-meter-long garden, which I regularly played football on, as well as the neighboring house on the other side of my back garden fence. But what I then saw, in a short distance over the roof of this particular neighboring house, would be a complete first. What I saw, flying, gliding, or simply just moving 100 meters or less away from my bedroom window, was what I can only describe as a flying, saucer-shaped-like object. In the past, I described this object as the most stereotypical flying saucer shape you could ever see or imagine. The night was too dark to see its color, but I remember it making a distinctive humming noise as it moved over the town beneath it. But how I knew this object was saucer-shaped was because as it moved, or indeed hummed, a single row of small bright lights moved around and around. At that age, if I imagined a flying saucer, I would have pictured a particularly large craft, but this object seemed no larger than a car or a small van. The speed at which this thing moved was not particularly fast or slow, but fast enough so that what I was seeing was gone in the next 5 to 10 seconds. Not knowing if what I had just seen was in fact real or just a dream, I pinched and slapped myself, hard enough to wake up almost anyone. But I was awake, and, as you can imagine, I was in disbelief. If any one thing, paranormal or otherwise, that you didn't already know or believe and just appeared to you, confirming absolute proof, whether it was God or Jesus Christ, a heaven or a hell, even ghosts and yes, aliens. I think anyone would have had the very same first reaction. This can't be real. I must be dreaming. Do I need to question the meaning and my own understanding of life? That was the reaction I remember having, rational in the face of the unbelievable. If you were to ask me what I did next, having witnessed such an extraordinary and incomprehensible sight, you'd be surprised to learn that what I did was simply lay back down on my pillow and eventually fall back to sleep. You'd probably be surprised, but that's what I did. The very next day, with the event of last night still fresh in my mind, I found my mom putting laundry away in her and my dad's bedroom. Feeling comfortable enough to tell my mom almost anything, even which girls at school I fancied, I told her exactly what I saw the night before. Like any parent would, having been told a fictitious-sounding story by your young child, my mom showed no indication of surprise or even shock, instead responding in the lines of "oh wow," or "oh really," as she carried on folding the laundry on the bed. I asked her if she believed me, and she said she did, but even before I confessed to her what I saw, I knew she wouldn't. Maybe I just needed to get what I saw that night instantly off my chest, and telling my mom would be the best way to do it, without facing ridicule from my friends, being laughed at by my sister, or simply just ignored by my dad. As unbelievable as the story that I told my mom was, I knew what I saw that night was real, and I think most people on this planet know when they're dreaming and when they are not, and I just knew I wasn't. If this was the case, then what I saw from my bedroom window that night was indeed a flying saucer, a UFO. It may then come as a surprise to whomever is reading this, as it did for me, to learn that despite bearing witness to what appeared to be an unforgettable UFO experience, I had almost completely forgotten about what happened that night, not fully recollecting what I saw until the latter part of last year. Was I in denial at what I saw? Did my mind just choose to repress the memory of it? When I first wrote of this experience only recently, an online user speculated as much to me, that my young brain couldn't comprehend what I had seen and therefore repressed the whole experience. But, like I have already said, this would not be my only potential UFO encounter. And the next time, thankfully, I wouldn't be alone. During the summer of 2012, and having just graduated primary school, my 6 friends and I ventured almost every day to the exact same place along the outskirts of town. We had found a field with a small adjoining wooded area, and very quickly, this area became our brand new den, which we spent most days climbing trees or playing tag hide and seek. At the very end of our den was a 4 feet wide creek. Separating the field, we played in from the town's rugby club that was also on the outskirts of town. The reason I bring up this creek is because my friends and I, upon discovering it, would also spend a lot of our time there that summer. We enjoyed playing this juvenile game where one of us had to leap over to the embankment on the other side or cross via a narrow wooden plank we found to make a bridge. Being the attention seeker I was at that age, I was always willing to jump up and over to the other side. In fact, I was the best. Anyone else who tried mostly ended up with 1 foot in the less than sanitary water. Several months later, however, and nearly halfway through our first year of secondary school, our tradition of jumping creeks and field hide and seek had sadly become far less frequent with the ongoing school year. That was until one afternoon, or maybe it was evening, I don't remember, my friends and I ventured back to our den and the nearby creek, crossing over and entering behind the grounds of the rugby club. These grounds consisted of 2 large rugby fields and a smaller patch of grass by the side, which is where the creek had led us. What the 5 or 6 of us were doing there, I'm not sure. We did sometimes use the grounds to play tag hide and seek, or other times we just explored. But what I remember next from that afternoon/evening, in whichever autumn month it was we caught sight of something flying in the not-too-distant sky and heading directly our way. At first, we must have thought it was nothing more than an airplane or Royal Air Force craft, as our town had them passing the sky on a regular basis. The closer this thing got, however, the more it started to look like something else, something none of us had probably ever seen before. It started to look like what our juvenile, imaginative minds could only interpret as an alien spacecraft of some kind, so much so that one of my friends said something in the lines of, "Is that a UFO?" as though speaking the minds of all of us. Whatever this thing was, it was still coming our way and flying curiously low. As close as it was now, I think we were all waiting for this craft to visually clarify for us that it was some kind of plane, but what I can still remember vividly is this thing being directly over our heads. And my next thought while looking up to it was, that is a UFO, an alien spaceship. Before any other thought could then enter my mind, whether it be one of awe, dread, or panic, I hear one of my friends a meter or 2 behind me shout SHIT. By the time I look behind me, all I see is every one of my friends running away towards the embankment of the creek, as though running for their lives. If I recall, it was just me and my friend George who didn't. I'm sure I thought of running too, but must have been in such awe or disbelief at what I was seeing. And even if I did run, I thought it was sure to abduct me. Whether I ran or stood right where I was, I felt convinced there was nothing I could really do. If it was going to take me, it would. When I turn away from my friends to look back up at what I see to be an alien craft, what I instead see is some kind of low-flying military jet turned slightly away from us now and flying off. My friends also must have noticed it was just a military jet, as they had stopped running and now joined slowly back with the rest of the group, realizing there was nothing to be afraid of anymore. Although my memory of the following conversation is hazy, we did discuss what we had just seen, with every one of us indeed thinking it was a UFO at first, only to then realize it was a military jet. I don't remember the conversation going any further from there, or what we even did afterwards for that matter. We probably just went back into town and played football at the park. However, something I discreetly remember to this day is that in the next 2 years that I still knew them, before packing up my things and moving abroad with my family, is that not a single one of us ever talked about the experience again. Not even for a laugh. There was no, remember when we all thought we saw a UFO, but it was really just a plane? I did drift away from most of these friends by the following year, as we were all in separate classes in school and played for rival football teams. So perhaps they did talk about the experience, except without me there. In my last year before moving abroad, however, I did reacquaint myself with my best friend Kai, who was there that day at the rugby club. We had drama class together that year, and it was in these lessons that we learned all about these terrifying urban legends, in which the class afterwards had to dramatically perform them. It was also from these lessons that Kai and myself became obsessed with urban legends, so much so that we would watch scary YouTube videos about them. But in that same year, enjoying to be scared together, not once to my recollection did either of us ever bring up that experience at the rugby club. Not once. Kai was one of my friends I saw run away that day, so he was obviously scared by the craft as well. But I never brought it up either. In fact, I think I almost forgot about the experience altogether, just like my first experience a year prior to it. But what's even crazier to me is that I seem to forget about both of these experiences, regardless of what they were, for the next 10 years. If you're wondering why I'm talking about this second experience, even though it only turned out to be a military jet, it's because since recollecting my first experience recently and becoming acquainted with UFO lore and history, some things about that day at the rugby club just don't seem to add up to me. Number one, if this was an RAF jet, then it was flying dangerously low, potentially 100 to 160 feet above us. From what I've researched, RAF jets can fly as low as 100 feet, but when it comes to populated areas containing vehicles and civilians, then it can go no lower than 500 feet. If this was a jet, it may not have even seen my friends and I, but it was still flying in and around a populated town. Number two, I was 100% convinced that this craft flying over me was an alien craft 100 feet or so above me, and that is what I believed I was seeing. It was only when I looked to my friends running away and then back again that it was somehow now a military jet. Number three, and perhaps the most confusing aspect of this experience, is that the RAF jet, from my recollection, made barely any noise. From what I've read, RAF jets at only 25 meters after takeoff are so loud it can rupture your eardrums. Like I said, this jet was no more than 160 feet above us, yet I could still hear my friend cuss the S word behind me. Having recently fallen down the UFO rabbit hole in the past year, I did come across one video, whether real or a hoax, of a spinning, bright, glowing light in the clear day sky that slowly morphed into a standard airliner. Although in the video, this transition took the better part of a minute, I then wondered if the craft I saw that day could possibly have done the same thing. However, when I previously shared my experiences online, only several months ago, one person rationally suggested that the craft I saw could have in fact been the Avro Vulcan XH-558, which was active in 2012 and based at Doncaster Sheffield Airport, not that far from Goole. The Avro Vulcan is indeed a very odd-looking military craft, with wings resembling something like you would see out of Star Trek. Maybe that's why it was called the Avro Vulcan. From what I remember, in the few seconds that I fully believed this thing flying over me to be a UFO, it didn't strike me as flying saucer shaped, not like the one I'd seen a year before. Regardless, whatever this craft was, it definitely struck me as alien at first, and maybe what I thought I was seeing was a different kind of alien craft, or maybe it really was just a military jet, an oddly shaped one at that. If you were to ask me now, in the year 2024, if what I saw in 2012 was either a UFO or simply an RAF jet, for the sake of rationality, I would say it was just a jet, whose strange appearance merely confused a group of 12-year-old boys. However, to conclude the speculation of this second experience, I will leave you with this. Not long after posting of my experiences, an online user advised me to share my story with a specific UFO investigator who particularly focuses on UFO activity in the Yorkshire area. Feeling in need of answers, I emailed this very same investigator. Intrigued by my story, he requested a conversation over the phone with me. And after relaying this second experience with him, highlighting how this jet was supposedly flying dangerously low, without producing much sound at all, he simply said to me that wasn't a military craft. If you were also to ask me whether I believe in aliens, I would say that I do. Not because of what I saw. I still don't know if what I saw was real. I do believe in aliens, or whatever they are. There are countless theories, simply because since I first fell down this UFO rabbit hole, learning of the experiences of many others, the existence of extraterrestrials no longer appears irrational to me. After all, can we really be the only intelligent beings to exist in this universe? The answer is I don't know. But what I do know is that for me, like it will be for countless others, the truth is still out there somewhere. Maybe even right here on our very own planet. Third story. A few weeks ago, I took a lame, blurry video of a UFO. Now I really wish I hadn't. First things first, sorry if I get too incoherent at any point here. I'm trying to bang my account of things out as fast as possible, and I'm under a lot of pressure. My headache's getting worse, but typing's making it feel better, weirdly. Feels right. So that's what I'm going to do, for as long as I'm capable. And when I'm done, I'm going to hit send, and if my internet comes back and this gets posted, then at the very least, maybe someone out there will read this and learn from my mistakes. God, my head hurts. Okay, focus. Here we go. I took that video, the one the UFO, maybe 3 weeks ago or so. I had work off, and I was having a pretty great day drinking garbage beer and fishing up at Goosehead. Oh, Goosehead's a lake. Or reservoir, I guess. You don't get many lakes in Arizona. I was packing up at dusk, and it was a cloudless day, great weather, and I had the dock all to myself. I took a second to drink it in before I stepped into my car to head home, and that was when I noticed the UFO. And when I say UFO, I really mean that literally like unidentified flying object, because that's literally all I can figure out about it. It was an object, probably, and it was flying, and I sure as hell couldn't identify it. But it wasn't like one of those classic saucers with the blinky lights and the tractor beam and the spooky techno sound effects. It was more like a single glowing shard, sitting totally still a few hundred feet up above the far end of the lake. Well, okay, still, in that it wasn't moving up and down or side to side. The thing itself, though, was jittering, moving without moving. Like, maybe I'd be able to whip up a good analogy if I didn't currently feel like I had an ice pick shoved through my eye. Migraines make for real effective writer's block. The best way I can think to describe it is that the UFO, it would be a triangle shape one moment and a sphere the next, and then a horseshoe shape, and then a spiral. But it was also all of those at once. Sorry if that doesn't make any sense. I'd post the video I took, but well, I don't have that anymore, obviously. I know that sounds like a cop-out, but I did take a video. My phone was low on storage, so I could only manage like 30 seconds of footage, but I got it. Didn't really do the thing justice, though. Like, have you ever tried to take a photo of the moon? You know, like one night the moon's just really, really big, and it looks awesome in person, and you think, man, that'd make a cool wallpaper, so you snap a pic with your phone. But no matter what angle you get or what settings you use the moon in your photo, just looks like a little speck. It was like that. Cool video of a glowing speck in the sky. The UFO disappeared, just sort of blinked away after I finished filming it, and I was left with a pretty useless 20-second clip and a fun story to tell. It didn't even occur to me to send the video to the news or anything. I wasn't even really convinced I'd seen anything all that extraordinary. Like if you'd told me that what I'd seen had been some sort of optical illusion, some weird interaction between the sun and the clouds, or a weather balloon, or I don't know, like swamp gas, I would have believed you. I promise I would have. I posted the video on Instagram. That was probably my big mistake, posting it publicly, but I don't know, I felt like I'd seen something kind of special, and living in such a small town, I didn't feel comfortable bringing video to the local news or anything. I thought this just be a cool little video for my friends and family. Nothing more. Swear to God. So I posted it and drove home and went to bed. I woke up to find that the video had exactly 0 likes and just as many comments. That was surprising. I mean, I'm not an influencer or anything, but I've never had a post get so little attention. More than that, though, the rejection stung, so I just sort of quietly deleted the post and went on with my life. Didn't think anything of it. A week later, I'm watching TV at home, and my brain sort of goes fuzzy. It was like deja vu, kind of, or the feeling you get in a dream when you know what's going to happen before it does. Dream logic. The feeling settled onto me, and in a few seconds I was up off the couch and heading to the door as if the doorbell had just rung. It hadn't. My house was silent. But in the moment, I don't think that little detail even crossed my mind. I opened the door to find Jockschnalb. Sorry. Headache just flared real bad. Had to take a sec. I opened the door to find. I just realized I never got the guy's name. I don't know if he has one. For the sake of the story, I guess I'll call him Tall, because that's the very first word that came to my mind. The figure standing stooped on my porch was easily the tallest man I'd ever seen, probably close to 6 feet 10 inches, maybe more. I couldn't get much of a sense for what his body looked like. He was all bundled up in what had to be 3 or 4 layers of coats and sweaters. But even then I could tell that his proportions were off. His legs didn't go nearly high enough. His shoulders were too narrow. His eyes. Headache again. Tall didn't have any hair. That was the second thing that struck me about him. No eyebrows, no eyelashes. His lips weren't, lip-shaped. Like instead of the usual tapering, half-moon curve most people's lips have, his were more like a perfectly uniform border of red skin circling a tiny little slit of a mouth. The only color on his otherwise white face. He smelled like antifreeze. So okay, I noticed all of these things about him. I know I did. I remember noticing them. And I also remember a tiny, logical, terrified part of me sounding alarm bells. But all of the weird details about his body fit the dream logic that I was currently wrapped up in, and that suffocating feeling of deja vu drowned out the part of me that knew better. So when he asked to come inside, his voice high and reedy and all in one breath, I stepped politely back and let him in without any hesitation. He didn't take off any of his coats or his shoes. He paced directly into my kitchen and started rummaging around my cabinets until he found a cup. He started filling the cup in my sink and turned to me, his slit mouth wrangled into a sort of smile. He asked me if I knew who he was. I answered honestly and said no. He asked me if I knew why he was here. I took a bleary, hazy sort of guess and said that maybe it had to do with the video I took. He nodded. I asked if he was from the government, and he laughed without opening his mouth. He asked me if I was scared. For some reason, I couldn't figure out what that question even meant, and I blinked, struggling. He nodded at that, looking satisfied, and then offered me the glass of water in his hand and told me to drink. The water was a murky gray. I don't remember seeing him add anything to it, but it clearly wasn't water anymore. When I lifted the drink to my lips to take a sip, I got a whiff of that antifreeze smell, so strong and acrid that it made my eyes water. In fact, the smell was so bad that it sort of jostled me out of my weird, almost trance, and I spasmed, dropping the glass. He didn't flinch when the cup shattered on the floor. He just squinted at me and hummed, an unexpectedly deep noise that could have meant anything. Just as suddenly as it had left, the deja vu feeling was back, and I stopped shaking. The voice in my head, the one telling me to scream or fight or run, went away, and I stared blankly at the mess on my floor. He asked me for my phone. I reached into my pocket and handed it to him. He asked me if I'd sent the video I took to the news. I told him that I was planning on it, but hadn't yet. He asked me if I'd told anyone in person. A little spike of worry managed to pierce the fog in my brain, and I stammered, trying to keep my answer in. After what must have been 10 seconds of choking and stuttering, I said that I'd told some of my family when I'd met them for dinner that weekend. He asked who, specifically, and what their addresses were. Again, the fog lifted as adrenaline and fear shot through my heart. I wrestled with that answer for maybe 5 minutes, but I won out in the end. I clamped my hands over my mouth, stuffed my fingers onto my tongue, and kept quiet. I don't remember him leaving. I woke up the next morning on my couch, and I quickly attributed the memory to being a weird dream. Even as I swept the broken glass from my kitchen floor and searched my house for my suddenly missing phone, I never once questioned that I'd dreamt the whole thing. I don't think I could have thought otherwise if I tried. 2 days later, I woke up to find Tall crouched next to my bed. I screamed, Obviously, at the sight of his stretched-out figure folded into a stooped squat at my bedside, his horrible, bloodless face looming down over mine, a flask of that gray liquid in his outstretched hands, nearly to my lips. I swatted the flask out of his hand before that déjà vu swept back in again, smothering my fear like a blanket. It only took a few seconds before I was just laying on my back, blinking patiently up at him. He asked me again who I told and where they lived. I said my fatter lives in Woodland. God, the migraine's making this hard. I'm going to have to stop soon. I stuffed my pillow into my mouth to keep from answering, and all of a sudden it was dawn, and I had memories of another weird dream to keep me occupied while I cleaned up the dark gray stain on my carpet. I thought the whole ordeal was over by today. Nearly 2 weeks had passed, and I'd really truly forgotten all about it. But then I took a step out for my lunch break at work this morning, and just as I was rounding the corner toward the parking lot, that déjà vu feeling hit me like a truck, almost bowling me over. It was so strong. I froze, reeling, and a reedy voice from just behind me told me to pinch my nose closed. Unable to even begin to question the order, let alone stop myself, I did. Then it told me to turn around. I did. Then another flask was being pushed into my mouth, forcefully enough to crack against my teeth, and a plastic hard hand was grabbing at my hair, yanking my head back. All it took was one surprised, strangled gulp, and my mouth and throat were burning as that antifreeze smell became an antifreeze taste. Tall clapped one of his cold hands over my mouth until I swallowed the whole drink, and then he was gone. I didn't fall asleep this time, though. No, this time I got in my car and drove straight home. Then once the déjà vu wore off and the first twinges of a headache started, I began to panic. I picked up my new phone, thinking that I should probably call an ambulance, probably get my stomach pumped before anything. But all I got was a busy signal. I tried over and over again. I tried to call the police, my dad. My dad who lives in Woodland, Wudo. My mom. I tried to text someone. None of those went through. I tried to physically leave my house, to run in the direction of town, but there are these men parked outside, these normal-looking men in suits, and each time they just sort of grab me, and the déjà vu comes back, and I'm suddenly back inside. Finally, I figured out that, although my internet's out, I have an old blog with a plugin installed that will auto-update when I make a post on a folder in my Google Docs, and I can do that in offline mode. I've made it this far, and although my vision's blotting with pain and my head's completely on fire, I haven't been knocked out yet. So at the moment, I think my best course of action is to post this publicly to total Venice man where my family lives. Hopefully get the word out about what's going on, about where I am, to maybe get some help. Please, anyone who reads this, my name is Todd Jacobs. You can find my address. My father lives in Woodland Ave. My sister lives on Doctor Street. My mother lives in Canyonave. Please don't hurt Themelo Vetham Therathian Leonza told Disware. And phone number in the About section of the blog. Please, if anyone can come find me and take me to the hospital, I really think I need to go. And if on the way you see a light in the sky, for the love of God, don't even look at it. I feel like my head's going to explode. Fourth story. I was contracted to help conceal a UFO crash. I think they're hiding something much worse. This is the easiest money you're ever going to make. In your line of work, that's a godsend. I stared at the generic, nameless suit standing in front of me. He claimed that he worked for the CIA, even flashed his badge and all. It didn't matter to me whether or not I believed him. The only thing that mattered was the fact that he paid half upfront, promising the other half after the job was done. I'm a part of a freelance mercenary group. Modern day, soldiers of fortune. We've been hired by government agencies before, but mostly just ones in Africa and Southeast Asia. You can imagine the type of shit that we've been asked to pull off. Safe to say, ethics aren't our primary concern. Now, I'm not blatantly immoral. If somebody offered us an exorbitant amount to oversee security for a human trafficking ring, I'd shoot them on the spot. But that's not to say that we're good people. Far from it, in fact. I don't expect you to feel sympathy for me. I just want to get my story out there. Something very strange is going on. Something that we should probably all be worried about. The mission itself was presented as a simple one, but the circumstances surrounding it were more unusual. We're staging a raid on a fanatical religious cult in Montana. Real psychotic bunch. I remember the suit telling me. I couldn't have imagined a better compensation than the one he was offering, so I listened intently. In all honesty, it was nearly enough to set my entire team up for retirement. Nevertheless, the whole situation unnerved me. We were caught completely off guard when they contacted us. Somehow, they found our email address on the dark web. I knew what we were doing was illegal, but they didn't seem to care. In fact, they never mentioned anything about our past crimes at all. In reality, they probably could have smoked us at any point. It didn't make a lot of sense why they chose not to, or why they chose to approach us at all. I had my hunches, of course. Most of them to do with the fact that we were entirely expendable and operated under the radar the best we could. Obviously, we didn't do a good enough job. Whatever. It is what it is. We needed this payday. Our little operations couldn't last forever. I know it's not important for the job, but what's the purpose of this raid? These guys growing weed or something? I asked. The question came out snarkier than I'd intended it to. The suit just grinned. I guess he had a sense of humor. Well, he began. I doubt you'll be telling anybody, so I suppose you might as well know. He seemed confident in that assumption. Maybe a little too much so. These people stumbled upon something that they shouldn't have, he continued. And then they try to hide it. Better not be something that's moments away from exploding. I said. The suit laughed this time. It's not so simple. Mr. ______, what do you know about the existence of extraterrestrial life? I raised my eyebrow. What the hell was he about to tell me? You're asking me if I believe in aliens, I responded. I took a second to consider it. Sure, why not? He went on to explain the real objective. It sounded absurd, but it was also coming out of the horse's mouth. You tell me what I'm supposed to believe. Apparently, a UFO had crashed on a farm in southeastern Montana a few days prior. As luck would have it, this farm belonged to the Church of Blissful Ascension, the cult in question. Shortly after it landed, some cult members stumbled upon it, subsequently being ordered to drag it into the leader's farmhouse, which was quite literally a mansion. Not much was known about the leader, other than his epithet, which was the divine messenger. Yeah, that type of guy. In reality, the cult was just a front for the trafficking of various goods, which had brainwashed its members into doing a lot of the dirty work. The most interesting part about this was the UFO itself. It was allegedly about 12 feet wide, 3 feet in diameter, and shaped like a pill. Before it landed, it had been moving erratically, seemingly teleporting short distances every few seconds or so. After it landed, some kind of dark green fluid began leaking out of it. Now for the actual mission. We simply had to go in and assist a team of SAC/SOG agents in wiping out every single member. No survivors. No witnesses. No exceptions. What the CIA planned to do with the UFO afterwards was none of our business. Not that I really wanted to know. We didn't have much time to prepare for the raid, but it didn't sound like we needed it. We were dealing with amateurs. Most likely just trigger-happy rednecks who couldn't strategize or aim for shit. I suppose raid wasn't the most apt way to describe the job. It seemed more like a slaughter than anything else. My team of 6 met up with the SAC/SOG team. Also 6 at a small underground complex used by the CIA for clandestine operations located about 30 minutes away from the farm. There, we geared up, went over tactics, and were told to repeat the objective at hand. No witnesses. No survivors. After all that was said and done, we piled into a SWAT truck and drove off. We'd never worked with the CIA in the past, so we supposed this was standard procedure. We suited up in black tactical gear provided by the agents themselves. This part was a bit odd to me. We had our own gear, stuff we'd been using for the longest time. Both sets were nearly identical, but the agents still insisted that we use theirs. The atmosphere in the truck was also disconcerting. Maybe it was just in my head, but everybody seemed so stiff. The agents clutched their rifles with iron grips while staring blankly ahead. My team tried talking amongst ourselves, but every word just felt awkward. I just chalked it up to nerves, which didn't make any sense because I'd never felt nerves like that before. After what felt like hours, we finally arrived, stopping some odd yards away from the farmhouse in order to remain undetected. We piled out, got into formation, and began. I was assigned the furthest flank position, so I stayed back as everybody else moved ahead. The closest people in front of me were one of my guys and an agent. It didn't take long for the strangeness to amplify. I noticed that the agent was gradually moving slower and slower. Eventually, I caught up to him. Well, it was more like I was forced to catch up. If I'd been moving any slower, I would have stopped. This agent had ruined the entire formation without anybody at the front noticing. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked as I walked up beside him. Without answering my question, he handed me a small scrap of paper. I took a quick glance at it, seeing an address and a date, time written down on it. "Meet me. Don't be late," he said, no inflection at all in his voice. "Do whatever you can to stay alive." As soon as he finished saying this, he sped up, reclaiming his original position. Obviously, that interaction was a cause for concern. I had to start wondering just what the hell I got my team into. I seriously started considering calling it off right then and there, but before I knew it, bullets were flying. The agents at the front had taken out the 2 guards standing at the front entrance. Soon after, we blew the door down and stormed inside. The agents shot down a few more guards stationed on the main floor before we started heading towards the basement. Once we got down there, 10 more guards/cult members were waiting for us. As per the mission, I raised my rifle and prepared to fire. Unfortunately, I couldn't have been prepared for what happened next. The agent at the front raised his fist, signaling for us to stop. Surprisingly, the guards didn't shoot at us. In fact, they didn't even react. The agents began turning around, before aiming their rifles at us instead. There's been a change of plans. We've been set up. That much was obvious. I didn't even have time to curse before the shit went off the rails. I ducked, feverishly trying to avoid point-blank gunfire while firing off nearly blind retaliatory shots. I managed to stumble my way behind some cover, but not before having 2 bullets graze my cheek and thigh. I peeked out, seeing the cult guards with malicious grins across their faces, also shooting at my team and my team only. Amidst the chaos, I could see Faisal, one of my men, rush an agent in an attempt to take him down to the ground. It was definitely a desperation move. But despite Faisal being substantially larger than the agent, his takedown was stuffed and he was subsequently thrown into a pillar. I could feel rage washing over me. I raised my rifle, aimed at the agent's head and fired. He didn't go down. My aim wasn't the issue. I could see the bullets drilling into the side of his helmet. The guy even flinched, but he didn't fall. Instead, he finished Faisal with a shot to the head and walked off. My mouth fell agape as I started backing up. I guess I was pretty rattled because I stopped paying attention to my surroundings. I felt myself bump into somebody before spinning around to see another agent stare me down. I thought about going for my knife, but before I could even make a move, the agent grabbed my arm and effortlessly judo slammed me onto the floor. I've been thrown before, but this was by far the most painful one I'd ever experienced. It felt like I was being tossed by a gorilla, not by a man with a similar build to me. His strength was ridiculous. Once on the ground, he mounted me before raising a fist. I knew with every fiber of my being that a single punch would pulverize my entire skull. As I started preparing my soul for the afterlife, the agent hesitated. "Play dead," he whispered, his voice a familiar one. He slammed his fist down inches away from my head and cracked the floor next to me before flipping me face down. "Don't move, no matter what happens," he whispered again. The pressure blanketing my body soon disappeared. The agent was getting up. I know what he said, but I didn't want to listen. I wanted to help my team. I got them into this mess, so I was obligated to get them out. But I didn't move. I knew it was useless. The basement had gotten quiet. No more sounds of struggle. My team was dead, and it was entirely my fault. Moments later, somebody began talking, snapping me out of my self-pity session. Geez. Job well done, huh? It didn't sound like one of the agents, so I assumed the voice belonged to a cult member. What the hell is going on? I thought to myself, were they working together? Now, about the payment dash. His question was interrupted by gunfire. A brief bout of additional chaos followed as more bodies dropped to the floor. I counted about 10 in total. I guess they weren't working together after all. All right, let's make this quick. One of the agents said. I had to wonder what he was talking about. What more do they need to do? I listened to the sounds of scuffling boots as the agents went around doing something. I opened one of my eyes, just a sliver, trying to make out what the hell was going on. I wish I just kept it closed. I was lying right next to Ricardo, one of my team members. As I stared at his lifeless, bullet-ridden body, I wanted to scream. I forced myself to keep my mouth shut. I continued watching as the agents went around to every single body, both my team and the cult members, and injected some kind of dark green fluid into their veins. Soon enough, they got to me. I held my breath and laid stiff as I felt the needle go into my arm. Thankfully, the guy didn't check my pulse. I was losing my mind at this point, not just because I was playing dead while some mystery fluid was being mixed into my bloodstream. It was the whole damn situation. If this hadn't been the worst day of my life, then it was certainly a contender. Afterwards, I heard the agents mumbling to each other. I couldn't make out much, but I did hear 12 hours being said quite a lot. 12 hours? 12 hours to what? After about 5 more minutes, the agents finally left. I laid still for some time after that. I wasn't exactly looking forward to seeing what the agents had left behind, but I wouldn't be able to get to the bottom of this by wasting my time mourning. My entire body was in pain as I pulled myself up. Try not to look at the massacre around me. I took out the piece of paper that one agent had given to me. The address belonged to a motel in Billings, while the meeting time was in 10 hours. I stripped off all of my gear and made myself look as presentable as I possibly could before getting the hell out of the farmhouse and trying to hitch a ride on a nearby road. A couple of hours and $200 later, somebody finally agreed to give me a ride. Luckily, Billings isn't too far away from the farm, so I think I'll be able to get to the motel in time. However, I'm not so sure that I'm going to like whatever's waiting for me there. Fifth story, UFO sighting when I was a kid. I'm writing this here because I found this thread tonight and thought I would share something that I've experienced probably around 2005/2006 when I was 10, 11 years old. I never told this to anyone, and I always felt the need to. It's one of those things I will always remember. So when I was a kid, we used to go on these monthly vacations in August to a beach town here in Portugal called Sesimbra. It was always very fun, going to the beach every day, playing football with my cousins, going out for dinner to eat seafood. It was a great time to be Portuguese and travel in your own country. Anyways, this old lady would arrange us beachfront apartments every year, and it would vary, some worse, some better. There's this huge building at the end of California Beach who seems to be falling off the edge, and there's these wooden stairs you need to climb to directly access the building from the beach. If you've been to Sesimbra, you'll know. We were spending the monthly vacation on this building, specifically on one of the top floors, I believe the 8th floor, and I used to sleep in the living room couch which had access to the balcony. I can't remember sleeping alone on a regular basis, mainly because I was really scared of the dark and being alone. Usually my dad would sleep there as well while my grandparents stayed in the only bedroom. However, I can't remember why he wasn't there this particular night. Since he worked a full-time job, he would often stay only for 2 weeks instead of the whole month. So that's probably why, I guess. I was sleeping when I woke up startled. I couldn't move. I was conscious, and I don't think it was sleep paralysis or anything like that. I was just terrified because of what I was hearing and seeing. It was a loud, buzzing sound and a light blue light covering the whole living room. I swear to God, I was so scared I couldn't face it because I felt like this presence wasn't good. I don't think it was evil or demonic, just terrifying and threatening. I felt like it was some kind of UFO just hovering near the balcony. I promised myself not to move until it was gone. I can't remember if I fell asleep again or if I simply waited for it to go away. What I do remember is thinking to myself, This is not a dream. This is real, and I won't forget that this is really happening. Anyway, this was good to get off my chest after so many years. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Till the end, subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.